This is Salty Believer Unscripted. I'm Josiah Walker.
And I'm Bryan Catherman.
Salty Believer Unscripted exists to help the Christian along his Christian journey. And on today's episode, I want to talk about change.
Yeah, but how about that music?
It is amazing. It's been a great change to our podcast. Look at this
stuff.
What,
is a great
maybe you're watching online, you're watching on YouTube, you're looking at us.
Do you
maybe
think
you're
it's
listening
a good
to
change?
us. That would be up to our listeners to decide.
You don't have an opinion?
I am enjoying it.
I want to hear from our listeners.
I firmly believe I have a face for radio, but I'm enjoying that we're doing some...
Okay, so we started doing these microphones.
Yeah.
They can't see all this stuff that
These
I mess with.
microphones.
Yeah, it's fancy, right? Yeah. And then we have the YouTube thing. So the listeners don't see it, but we're doing these YouTube videos, which I don't know if any of these have made it uploaded.
Hopefully. We might not be on the YouTubes if this doesn't work, right?
No idea. But all this has changed.
Yeah.
So I want to hear if people think it's helpful. Like SaltyBeliever@gmail.com. They can
That's
let
our
us
email.
know. I want to hear about it. Yeah. What kind of change are you talking about?
Well, not the change you have in your pocket. I'm talking about changes like we've just talked about.
I don't have
today.
any pennies.
No. The penny's been eliminated. There's a change to our currency. Change seems to be the only constant in life. It seems like we're always going through changes. Changes at work, changes in society.
Rigid state of flexibility.
I always say make sure you stay in a rigid state of flexibility. Like always.
Change.
Yeah. Change is always happening, especially in churches. I feel like church is always different, always changing. There's ebbs, flows, different things.
If it's not changing at some point, you really have to wonder what's going on. Things are just shifting, and some things should stay the same. The gospel should stay the
100%.
same. There's certain
God's
things
word doesn't change.
Yes, things we should cherish that way. But some things really do change. Change. Right?
Yeah, right off the bat, I remember when I was a kid growing up in church, puppets were huge things in kids ministry.
That's a good change. There
were flannel graphs that my Sunday school teacher used to help present the gospel message to me. My parents went to a different church when I was growing up that had drums and musical instruments, which was very different and a change from how they had grown up in a Baptist church with just an organ and a choir.
So music has changed. They used to call it the worship wars.
Yeah. Sometimes the order of the service has changed. I think we've talked about that in previous episodes.
The way you dress.
The way you dress.
The ministries. Most of the ministries, like kids ministry, is quite a bit different. You talked about flannel graphs, but even just the approach.
Sure.
There's a lot of things that are different with kids, different with parenting. You have technology problems. Youth has changed. The kids are facing some of the problems are very similar. Some of the problems are very different.
Yeah.
And then churches just have, even if you don't have things changing because of that, you have pastors come in who are different. You have policies that are different. Constitutions get changed for different reasons.
The community around the church changes, which changes the church.
Or even just the dynamic of the people. They grow up, they get older, they become grandparents, parents, or even, whatever.
Buildings change. We're sitting here in the Salty Believer Unscripted studios at Trinity Church, and this church you're telling me has gone through building changes. I think the foyer used to be the actual sanctuary of the church.
Did a bunch of remodel, and so there was that kind of change. This church used to speak in Swedish.
Wow.
And so they speak English. That was a big change. They went through all these things we're talking about. Just since I've been here, and even before I've been here, they got Pastor Kevin showed up, changes in staffing, changes in team ministry approach.
Okay.
Just how we preach in a team. Again, just different approaches to different things. It's change, and change is hard. Staffing can be a huge. I remember we merged Redeeming Life. When I was
we went through a merge.
That was a change. Yep. Those kinds of things. It was just for various reasons. Policies changed. Insurance requirements caused changes. You've had staffing change. I left.
Yeah, that's a change.
A change, and then you had staffing changes with worship person, and it's hard for people, I think, when church stuff changes.
Absolutely.
A lot of things in the world change, and they want some stability, but even in the church life, it just changes.
We ourselves even change. Right? As we're being sanctified,
we get old,
we're growing and changing. Okay. So is change always a bad thing?
I think that if you're talking about sanctification, you want to be changing.
Yeah.
If you're talking about the church, if you're growing, that's change.
Yeah.
If you want growth, that's change.
But that's hard sometimes because we really like the small community of a smaller church, and then we get big and we feel like we lose some of that community.
Or you're big and things get more intimate, and then you get frustrated. But how about this? the Great Commission says, go into these places that don't know Christ, bring the gospel. That's going to change entire communities.
Sure.
On top of that, grab that, reach behind you and grab this if you can. Okay, so what you've just handed me, so I have a subscription to World News, and they have a print option. I'm going to hold this up for YouTube, but I'm just going to read it. I don't know if I'm going to, oh look, there's Jeff Orge on the back. This one just came in the mail.
Nice.
And this just came in the mail, and on the cover, it caught my attention. I haven't read the article because I just barely got it. But it says, tidings of great joy. Could Christians from the global South, meaning like South America, Africa, I guess that would include, I was going to say Antarctica. I don't think there's a lot there. Australia. Could Christians from the global South rejuvenate the church in the West? And look at the picture. Like all of those individuals look like they're coming from another culture. And now they're sending missionaries to America. Well, things change.
Sure.
Right? In fact, okay, let's talk about this for change. So I live in Holdridge, Nebraska, just down the street. And I don't know what's going to happen at the point when this podcast comes out. Lexington is a town of like 10,000 people. Like 3,000 jobs just got cut.
Whoa.
There's a Tyson beef packing plant in there. And they're moving and they're gone. And
wow.
Those are the jobs. So I bet half the population their family gets a paycheck somehow in those, like, in that household. That touches it. That's going to be a huge change. People are asking us, well, what do we do? And what's going to happen there? And I don't know. We're just going to hold on to the gospel. We're going to trust the Lord. So you said, I don't think there's a time when we can ever expect no change.
So how do we walk through those changes in a healthy way, in a God-honoring way? Because a lot of times when change happens in our church, we get frustrated.
The first thing we do is freak out.
You know?
Because we don't want to, because immediately we take a default position that says, I know this, I don't want to change.
Right. There's some comfortability in it, right?
We never did this before. We always did this, and I'm going to fight it, and why this, and why that, and we struggle so much. But I think step number one is first ask yourself, does this matter?
Okay, does the change matter?
Here comes some, like, does it matter to me to lose my mind? And okay, so they're changing this thing. Am I okay with that? Sure. Does it make a big difference?
Like, I know some people who were at a church and they had installed the stained glass windows, or they had painted them, or grandma did, and they had to do some remodels and they had to take those stained glass windows out. Well, that really hurt that family because it was their grandmother who had put those in.
So in that case, you're like, okay, this change is going to have some impact. Why? I'm thinking of like, hey, we want you to check your kids in 10 minutes earlier.
Oh, yeah.
You know, something like that. Okay, is this really something I want to get bent out of shape about? And if I do, or if there's a problem, ask questions and go, hey, why? Not just, I'm not going to change, but why are we doing it this way?
Yeah, sometimes we get upset just because there are changes, but we don't stop to say, well, why is the church making these changes?
What's the reason for this? Why was, and that's okay. That's really, really okay. Or and sometimes, okay, well, they took the stained glass windows out, and maybe that's something that's hard for me or sad, but I need to process through this. Things do change. And then, so you're asking questions, and the question is, what can I do to help in this? Because believe me, in a church, when you have staff, the easiest thing they could ever do is change nothing, usually, for the staff.
Well, and if you never change, your church will just die, right? Because the world around your church building is probably changing. Your community is changing. People are moving in and out.
Usually the change is because your staff and the pastors, and they're trying to help you grow and know. There's just reasons for these changes.
And sometimes they're just little things. I remember when you left Redeeming Life Church, you have a doctorate in ministry. You had been preaching as a lead pastor for over 10 years. I stepped into that role. I do not have a doctorate. I have a different seminary degree. I had preached maybe 40 sermons when I became the lead pastor. My preaching style was drastically different than yours.
But I think that church was gracious to you.
Most of the church was pretty gracious, but we did have some people that are like, this isn't for me. I don't like this guy. I'm out of here.
Well, like they didn't move to Holdridge.
It would be really easy for me to go, I'm a failure because these people left.
Yeah. Yep.
But that's not always the case.
No, sometimes God
moves people and places and things.
Sometimes change, and you don't know always the parameters and the dynamics, but God changes things. Paul and Barnabas went off on missionary journeys. They had an issue. That thing changed, and then the next missionary journeys looked different, and then the next thing. Things change.
So when we're talking about, does the change matter? How does it affect the kingdom? How can I help in this change? is there ever a point where you feel like it's justified to leave the church because of a change, or is that something that we should try to weather and stick in with?
Well, I think we've done a whole podcast series, which you can probably find on SaltyBeliever.com somewhere. Like, when do we leave a church?
Sure.
Okay, well, if they're changing off the gospel, if they're preaching heresy, if the doctrines are now outside of things that are salvation, of course there's a time. But, I mean, don't get all caught up in the little tiny things.
Right.
That's not helpful. And sometimes we're so desperate to anchor in things. Church constitutions are an interesting one to me.
Sure.
The Bible and our doctrine should not be changing our understanding of God's word. Yeah. Now, we might start to realize and interpret this thing a little differently, but God's word doesn't change.
Right.
But our constitutions are tools that help us, for example, and bylaws and things. And there are some people that go, that's going to be the thing that's going to be the anchored truth.
Well, the Constitution?
Or the bylaws, right?
Okay,
like, if we find that it doesn't line up with the Bible and it's not serving us very well, if the whole church goes, we should change that, that's okay. But some people have got it in their mind that, like, a church constitution or a bylaw is the ultimate end-all, be-all. Like, the people who put it together didn't think of any possible reason for changing it.
Well, some of our church's bylaws and constitutional verbiage came out of our denomination's faith and theological statement. And so as we've been looking through some of those things I don't think really line up with who we are as a church. And if you're putting those into, we have to remember those are written by man.
Yeah, and you're talking about redeeming life.
I'm talking about redeeming life.
I was involved in writing that Constitution, and I've been like, that should change. And who am I to think that I've got it all sorted out perfectly?
But we don't ever want to put our Constitution in a higher authority than God's word.
No, not at all. Not at all.
And sometimes we have to remember that these changes are meant to help our church be a better church, a safer church for our children.
Right.
I know at Redeeming Life Church, after our church merged, we had to make some changes to the kids area.
The nursery door, this was a great idea in the 80s and 90s. They built the building.
Yeah.
You walked in to check in, you came into the lobby, and the nursery was right at the front door.
Boom. Drop them and run. Yeah.
Think about all the parents who just heard that and went, wait, the nursery door was literally at the front door of the church building?
Yeah.
And the parents were the parents of today who live in a big city with all the scary things and all the security safety things were like, that can't be. No. We had to move our nursery down the hall to a safe space.
We had to keep some doors locked. We had to create a pager system. And that felt really hard for some of the people who had been going there forever because they had never done anything like that.
That's right.
The other thing, too, is these changes can be good things to just help us be better. We change as people. So I look at young families today. We've got a guy who's just joined our church, a family that's joined our church, and they really love family integrated worship. They have a different view of kids ministry. When I was a kid, it was all about kids church and dropping the kids off and having their own thing.
Yep.
But now the parents really want the kids in the pews with them, which is not a foreign concept. I mean, the Puritan brothers and sisters, that's what they did when they came to America.
No, go look at all these little old churches that only had one big room.
Right.
Obviously, the kids were in there because they weren't outside playing in the cemetery. Because the church also had a cemetery next door. Do you see that in new churches?
Not very often.
Changes
But
happen.
a lot of times we say, well, this isn't how we did things before. But we have to realize, well, if the community around us is changing and these people are wanting things different, we need to look at what they want as long as everything we're looking at fits into God's word and the gospel. And that's central to every decision we're making.
But okay, so we're talking about all these big things at church. You walk in, they changed your coffee.
Ooh,
well, you don't drink coffee, so that's not a problem for you.
Well, our listeners don't need to know that. They can pretend.
So you drink coffee.
Yeah.
I mean, you like coffee more than anything else.
It's amazing.
Or something like that, right? So our natural tendency in the small things is to kind of get a little bent out of shape. Yeah. Why did they do this without starting with all these things we're talking about? Okay, things do change. There's probably reasons. It's probably like they weren't just vindictively out trying to hurt my life.
Sometimes I think the smaller changes are the harder changes.
I do think the smaller change, like if you show up and you say, okay, we're going to change the coffee, for example, or change whatever like that.
I have a broken baptistry at my building. I think if I ripped that out, everyone would be like, finally, it's been broken for years. But man, if I change the creamer situation with the coffee.
I know, right? I know. By the way, we need to get a mission team out to you to pull that thing out and remodel your stage. Yeah.
That'd be awesome. That'd be helpful.
But you're right. The littler things they just chew people up sometimes. Why? I think because they come at us unexpected. Yeah. Because we find comfort in those things always being that way. It's a little like, do you remember when they stopped making Twinkies?
Yes, that was a dark day.
But how many Twinkies were you eating before that?
Apparently not enough.
But we want to live in a world where we know we can go to the store and get Twinkies, yet we're not buying them. Our habits and purchases have changed. Toys R Us couldn't keep up, and they've closed, but we don't want that, so we want to fight it, bringing it back, the change is hard.
And I think this is where it's important to bring it back around to the fact that the change is what God uses to sanctify us and to grow us.
Yep.
And I think about the early church in Acts when Christ ascended and went up to heaven, and the change that they went through, and the persecution that they faced, and the difficulties that they battled with, and just the uncertainty of where is Christ, why isn't he come back? Those were the ways that God used to advance the gospel. You know, we see in Acts 1, everyone's together, and then they get dispersed.
And they're scattered.
And had they not been scattered, it would have just been this holy huddle. And so change is actually a good thing.
And actually, even have Acts as a change, because before that they didn't have Acts, and they didn't have they didn't have Pentecost.
They didn't have a New Testament.
Jesus didn't come in his earthly ministry, and he had the 400 years. I mean, you can just keep backing that up and backing that up and back. So all of these things are just the realities we live in. And I think my advice to our listeners would be try to be people that come along with your pastors as you try to help them recognize, okay, this is going to be difficult. Can I do this? What's it going to take? Yes. Before you're the people who freak out and change. Yeah. This isn't like what I know.
Well,
just work at it, because it's not usually pastors are not sitting down, especially if they're not, in their 20s, maybe early 30s. They're usually not going, man, how many things can I just, I'm going to rip the Band-Aid off and do this thing and do that. Most people are not doing that. They're going, okay, I got to bring the church through this. This is going to be difficult. I wonder how many people are going to send me nasty emails. I wonder how many people are going to complain. How many people are going to be talking about it at the grocery store? It's not fun to have to bring change, but usually these pastors are really seeking to care for the church, seeking to care for the world in which we live in, which brings change, so just try to be a help in change.
Absolutely. Because think about all the change that you've gone through in your life, even from a young child. I'll never forget the day I had to get on the bus for the first time by myself and go to school without my parents, and there's a time when we leave our parents, we move out and we live on our own. If we never experience these changes, we'll never mature, we'll never grow. And so if you've been around for a while, you've gone through some of these changes, you've dealt with pastoral shifts in the church or changes to the coffee, you can help be a force for good and help bring people along in that and support your pastor in that.
In your Christian walk. And I think we could just end on this for both of us.
Sure.
In your Christian walk in the last 3 to 5 years, besides me leaving, I don't think you're going to say that, but besides me moving to Holdridge, what changes have you struggled the most with? Maybe that's not the one. I'm just taking it off the table.
I think just the world around me, really. I mean, my wife and I have grown stronger together through some difficult seasons in the last couple of years that, man, just ate my lunch. But it was in that season I remember thinking, Lord, why are you doing this to me? Why am I going through these things? We're kind of struggling, and it just caused us to really come closer together and really draw closer to Christ.
Big changes.
Oftentimes God uses trials in our lives to point us to him. And so I think the one thing with changes is just a great reminder to keep your eyes fixed on Christ and look to him.
That's a pretty good answer. That's a lot better answer than mine. I should have gone first. But I was just going to say, watching how I get information from around the world, information from pastors. So it used to be that there were just certain voices. There were big, heavy hitter voices. They were at the conferences. They were speaking. They kind of unified across denominations. It doesn't seem like there's any big, heavy hitting Christian voices right now. So I'm like, well, where do I understand? Where do I go for this and go for that? And then the social media thing has changed. And then it's like what it used to be that if you were on Facebook in, 2010, kind of everybody was seeing the same things, hearing about the same conferences. Now it's all the different social media platforms. Generational groups are on different things. This group isn't working with that group, and these people aren't talking with those people. There's not like who's the next generation of the John Pipers and the John MacArthurs and there's not like this unifying force, because everybody can go to the internet and they can find their own little pockets of people and they can do whatever, and then they don't even have to listen to their own pastors because they can have a pastor on the internet. Like, there's just been so much of that change that church, to me, and just a Christian life feels a lot different.
That's a good reminder.
It's hard.
Change is hard, but oftentimes change is good. And so I want to leave us with this verse as we remember how Christ is the same every day. Psalm 100, verse 5 says, "For the Lord is good, and his faithful love endures forever, his faithfulness through all generations." Until next time.
Thanks for listening. Find more resources at SaltyBeliever.com.